Welcome to Advanced Data Analysis 1 with me, Erik Erhardt, Professor of Statistics at the University of New Mexico. In this video, we'll be looking at the first homework assignment, the personal codebook. And so I'll help get you started just now. Here's the website. I'll scroll down to the first assignment. Here we are in the second class of the first week. And we're going to be working on codebook stuff. So this homework assignment is the personal codebook here. I'm going to start by clicking on this, right-clicking, and saving this link to my desktop. You should save this file to a place that makes sense for you, which would be probably your Advanced Data Analysis 1 folder on your website or on your hard drive where you're keeping track of all your files. In my case, my desktop is my junk area, so I'm just for demonstration purposes. So I'm going to go over to RStudio, and I'm going to pretend I haven't opened that file yet already. And I'm going to click Open, browse over to my desktop, and find that file and open it. We won't need these windows to the right, so I'll privilege the space we have. So I'm going to start off by compiling this file so that we can see what it looks like. And as I'll need to do each time, I'll need to resize this window into the viewable area where I'm recording the video. All right. So here is an example of a personal codebook. Okay, so below I give an example of a personal codebook to help get you started on this assignment. This is the beginning of your investigation towards answering a few questions that you'll pursue throughout this semester. So this is the beginning of the poster that you're going to create at the very end. So the purpose of this assignment is, firstly, to select a data set, then to identify a specific topic of interest as you're looking through that data set, and finally to prepare a codebook of your own. And I have an example down here. So the codebook of your own is going to be a subset of the larger codebook that will include the questions that are asked, the variables that are collected, and so on. And it may be the case that over the next few weeks you develop this codebook more, but the purpose is to get you started. Okay? So I'm going to start off by scrolling to the bottom here and looking at the rubric. So these are the things that I want you to have finished. I want you, after looking at several code books, and we'll go over and look at some in a moment, you'll want to select a topic of interest and want to make sure that the variables you select are relevant to the questions that you want to ask. Did you choose at least one variable that's a unique identifier? And you need to choose at least 2 numeric variables and 2 categorical variables. The purpose of choosing 2 of each, in addition to your unique identifier, is to have the possibilities of looking at associations between every pair type of variables. That was poorly stated. I want you to be able to look at the relationship between pairs of variables so that you can have 2 continuous variables, 2 categorical variables, and 1 of each. All right. For each variable, is there a variable description, data type, and the coded values? And finally, you'll upload this to CrowdGrader. An important feature here is that you'll want to keep it anonymous because you don't want to know whose assignments you're grading, and you don't want people to know which assignment is yours. So I'm going to page up to the top of this document, and notice that the default here, which I've entered, is for the author to be anonymous. So leave that as it is. Once the assignment is graded, feel free to come back to this and put your name in there to claim it as your own. So before I dig into the example that I have, I'm using the NESARC database, which is on the Alcohol and Related Conditions Survey. notice I've got the data set here, what my initial thinking is for the sort of questions I'm developing as I'm brainstorming. Eventually I come down to a topic of interest, and then this is just for your purpose of how I did it. Okay. Finally, this is my code book. So I've specified what the data set is, what the primary association is that I'm going to be testing. In this case, I'm asking about the nicotine dependence versus frequency and quantity of smoking. So is there a relationship between how much I smoke and how dependent I am on nicotine? That's a question I may be able to answer from this data set. And the variables I end up selecting from this is, so notice I specify a key up here to say how am I going to, you know what, I'm going to do one thing here. There is a button up here that says View Open in Browser, and that will allow me to see the same file, and if I press Control plus, I'll be able to zoom in, and I think that'll make a big difference for you watching this. So here's my code book. Notice I specified a key to help whoever is viewing this decode what the chunks of text are below. Okay, so at first I have a variable name, and then I have a variable description, the data type, whether it's continuous, discrete, nominal, or ordinal. Okay, so continuous and discrete are both types of numerical variables, whereas nominal and ordinal are categorical types. Finally, I have got a frequency, like this number here, what the value is that variable can take, and then a description of those numbers. So let's just scroll very quickly through my code book, and then we'll go look at the big code books that I got this data from. So I grabbed an ID number, I grabbed an individual sex, which in case was coded 1 and 2 for male and female respectively. I've got the age of the person, which is a continuous number. And in this case, 98 for age. 98 is the top number. If you're 98 or older, if you were 102 years old, you'd be coded as 98. It's an interesting choice to make here. But presumably if you're smoking a lot, maybe 98 is a sort of an upper bound for you anyway. Check 321 ends up being the cigarette smoking status, and whether you've smoked in the last 12 months or not, and so on. And then we've got a few other variables. Okay, I selected a bunch of variables here. I think I've got, if I zoom out, we can very quickly take a look. I've got the ID number, sex, age, that's 3, and then 5 more after that. So I've got 8 variables total. You've got to at least have 5, right? The unique identifier, and then 2 numeric and 2 categorical variables. But you know, find variables that are interesting to you. So what I'd like to do right now is jump over to the website, because we first have to select a data set. Okay, we've talked about some of those data sets in the chapter 2 of the passion-driven statistics. So let me go over to the website. Our data sets are on UNM Learn. So I'm going to click on UNM Learn, and I've logged in here already. I'm going to go to the Resources tab where the data are. Here's the PDS data. I'll open that folder. And we've already installed this data set, the passion-driven statistics data set, in an earlier video. These 4 zip files are compressed archives of the code books. And so in order to investigate this, these are really large. Okay, so I recommend right-clicking here and let's see if that works, and save link as. And that will, here's the zip file, and I can save that to my computer. So I recommend saving those 4 files to your computer. I'm going to go over to my Explorer window here, my Windows Explorer, and I am looking in the data folder. And in the data folder over to the right, you can see I've got these 4 zip files. If you right-click on one of these, depending on what your computer does, you can say something like extract to a certain folder. Okay, and you may need to, another way is to double-click here and open a version of a decompression program and select all the files and extract those files to a certain folder. Okay, so there's going to be an easy way to do this on your computer. And so I've done that, and that has created these 4 folders here. One for the AdHealth Wave 1, one for AdHealth Wave 2, one for the NESARC, and finally I've got the Outlook on Life. So I'm going to take a peek into NESARC right now, and there is a codebook there. I also have a text file here, but that's not the important part. You know what? I think it's not the important part, but maybe I'm wrong. So I've opened, I'll drag it down here so we can all see it. In the text file, sorry for this, resizing windows is a little bit annoying. All right. This is the content of the text file. It shows that there are 14 sections, okay? This is section 14 down here. And it says what the sections are. So section 1, for example, is background information, and it starts on page 1. Then we have information about alcohol consumption, dependence, and treatment. And that's from pages 30 up to 76. 77 starts with what your family history of alcoholism is, and so on. Okay, and man, it goes probably almost 500 pages. All right, so let's go back and open up the PDF file, Codebook, and I'm going to again resize this window a little bit so we get a little bit more in the viewable area. And this is page 1. Let me zoom in here. This is a very simplified simplified structure for a code book. Notice we have got something called a tape location. Now this is old-timey language. You can imagine. Let me page down to the last page. Okay, this is page 479, and this is the last variable. Okay, this is the average daily volume of ethanol consumed. Okay, and this has tape location 3675 to 3682. So this is a 7-character number. Is that true? 8-character number, and you can see this number right here, which is one of the possible values, is an 8-character value. Okay, so it's basically a 3-digit number, decimal point, and to 4 decimal places after the decimal point. So believe it or not, this data set was stored in what's called fixed width format. And so you can imagine a long string of numbers, 3,682 characters long, and they're all run together, all these numbers and letters and everything. And so if I go back to the first page, the first 5 numbers of this long string are the ID number. And so here's one example of an ID number. The next 5 characters, from character 6 to character 10, is what's called the PSU. I don't know what that is. We've got something called stratum, a person's weight, C day, C month, C year. Okay, so this is the date of the interview, day, month, and year. We have the region that they're in, and so on. All right, and so what I did was I looked at the code book and I said, all right, this is the structure that the code book's in. It already has, okay, it's got this tape location. I don't really care about that. It has something called a source code. That's words that they're using to indicate what the variable name is. So the source code is ID num. Okay, fine. We've got a frequency column. It says that there's 43,000, almost 100 observations in this data set. And then information. And this information, oh, sorry, that's not part of that. Then we've got item value and description. So, for example, the ID numbers go from 1 to 43093, and the description is unique identification number. Great. Let's look down at the region. This is a categorical variable. We've got the item value. Okay, the item value is 1 for the Northeast, and 2 for the Midwest, and so on. So this is a very nice code book. It's very clean and very obvious about what everything is. Let me page down a bit. In fact, let me go back to that text file and see alcohol consumption is the next section, section 2A, and it starts on page 30. So if I go back to the PDF file and I page down to page 30, you can see the page numbers in the top right corner here, 6, 7, 8. I'll go all the way to 30. There's 30, and here's the beginning, section 2A for alcohol consumption. Okay, now there are lots of variables in this data set. I think it's 400 something. So how are you going to find what you're looking for? Well, I've gave you some suggestions here how I did it. So after I developed my questions, and why don't we give a quick look through those. So what's my initial thinking? While nicotine dependence is a good starting point, I need to determine what it is about nicotine dependence that I'm interested in. It strikes me that friends and acquaintances that I have known through the years that became hooked on cigarettes did so across very different periods of time. Some seem to be dependent soon after their first few experiences with smoking, and others after many years of generally irregular smoking behavior. I decide that I am most interested in exploring the association between level of smoking and nicotine dependence. So that's where I finally come to the main question that I'm interested in after thinking about this. So I'm going to add to my codebook variables reflecting smoking levels, which might be smoking quantity or frequencies, and I owe you a comma after that EG. So those are the variables I'm looking for. Ultimately, I come down to this. I've decided to investigate the relationship between nicotine dependence and the frequency and quantity of smoking on people up to 25 years old. I'm mostly focusing it on this age group because that reflects more the demographic of the people in the class. Okay? The association may differ by ethnicity, by age, gender, and other factors. So if I'm expecting, for example, differences by gender, then I better include gender in my data set. All right? So let's try to find gender. So I'm going to go over here, and I'm just going to type Control F to bring up the Find window. Let me resize this a little bit so you can see more of the complete tools in the Adobe Reader. And I'm going to try gender first and press Enter. All right, no matches. That's probably because they used sex. Okay, became more sexually active. All right, so we're notice where the scroll bar is on the right side. It's down about 3/4. Sex is probably going to be something that's asked in the very first few questions, right? It's very basic demographic information. So I'm going to scroll up to the top. I'm going to click somewhere, and hoping that the search now for the search now for sex is going to start from the top. So I'm going to press Enter. And here we are. Very early on, you can see the scroll bar is right at the top. I'm on page 5. We have sex, male, and female. So this is the variable. This is a variable I want to include. So I'm just going to highlight it, copy it, and go over to my editor, and I paste it in. Okay. And let's take a look. If I scroll down here, here's sex. Okay, and it's basically the same information that I had over here. So if I put these side by side, okay, sex is the name of the variable. A description is sex. Really, not much more you need to say than that. And then I wrote additionally that this is a nominal variable, meaning it's categorical and it's a name variable. Oh, that's not working too well. And then finally, this text right here is just copied right over. So I've got the frequencies and I've got the code 1 for male. So I didn't do much more than copy and paste and then format a little bit. So I decided, you can see the gray line, the box around the code book here. let's go and look at in RStudio how I did that. So I'm going to maximize this window. I'm going to scroll on down, all right, to where the codebook starts. So if I bring up both of these windows at the same time, it's a little tricky to resize this into the viewable area, but all right, there we go. And to the right, resize Codebook. Okay, so Codebook is a nice big header. The formatting there is start with a # and space, and then put the word Codebook. Then I decided to make this a code block, but not have it be evaluated by any language. So I have a triple left single quote mark. That's the tick mark in the upper left-hand corner of your keyboard under your escape key. Did that triple, and you can see everything in that looks, at least on my screen, as this gold color. It would look different for you depending on what your colors are. And if I scroll all the way down, it ends with another triple tick. So everything between those two lines of those triple left tick marks, single quotes, looks, how would you say this, in fixed field format. So that all the indentation that is in my original text file appears that way on the right. I think that was a very easy way to do this. There's other ways you can work and create tables, as some of you did during the medical records exercise. You could also make them as bulleted lists, but I decided to use this structure of a code block because for me that was the simplest. So that's what I'd like you to do. This assignment is basically look through the code books, see what area interests you, and if you want some background for what each of the data sets are, let me go back one page if I can. Under the instructions for installing the PDS datasets, if you click on that and you scroll down to the bottom, there's a short description of what each dataset is. Okay, so the first wave of the adolescent to adult health study, the AD health study, indicates that these are students who are in grades 7 through 12 in the US in the mid-90s. So I can make this a little bit bigger. Wave 4 are those same students, the same people, but it's almost 20 years later. Okay. The NESARC is again on alcohol and related conditions, and has 3,000 variables. That is by far the biggest data set. The AD Health data set has 6,500 observations with almost 3,000 variables. It's about the same, but the much bigger study population. 3,000 variables, outrageous. And then the Outlook on Life survey. This is pretty interesting. UC Irvine was interested in political and social attitudes in the United States, and wanted to know, how people were feeling about their futures. And so this survey gets into that. And so I think there's a lot of interesting questions that can be asked here too. Let's see, additional questions addressed issues such as common fate, nationalism, equality, discrimination, relations with law enforcement. That's a hot topic here in Albuquerque recently. So I think it's really interesting. There's lots of interesting questions to investigate in each of these data sets. So find something that's interesting and exciting to you, and start with you can start with my template, which is online here in the personal codebook. You'll see all my stuff in there. Just strip out the stuff of mine that you're not going to use and replace it with your interesting questions and the variables that you'll use to answer those interesting questions. Have fun.